The Swedes see themselves as global cosmopolitan individualists, the world's most modern and Western people. I think that self-image is a delusion the Swedes have. Individualists in lifestyle, yes, pursuing sports and hobbies, but there's also an almost Eastern collectivism in Swedish culture. This is good in that Swedes are hard-working, honest, can collaborate and work in teams. It is Sweden's ingredient X, the reason why Sweden is so prosperous. Sweden is Europe's Japan. But Swedes need to ask themselves what has made them a successful society. Their erroneous self-image prevents them from doing that. What makes a society successful? According to Paul Collier, an academic at Oxford University, societies need successful narratives, successful institutions, successful norms. Let's focus on norms. The norm about abstaining from violence is enormously important in avoiding a diversion of resources into security and protection. People can be trusted is another important norm, which allows societies to reap the benefits of social cooperation. High-trust societies spend less on resources for enforcement, so have lower transaction costs. One worrying development in Sweden is declining trust levels, especially among the young, and it's its lowest in multi-ethnic towns like Malmo, according to the historian and sociologist Lars Trägård. That is a recent trend. Another worrying trend is the growing number of people who think it's okay to cheat the welfare state. 55% of the population think it's not okay to cheat the welfare state in 2013, but that's down from 83% in the early 80s. I see no awareness of these trends among the many Swedes who cheer on as much immigration as possible. Social scientists have shown that social cooperation and trust levels are much lower in the Middle East. And Paul Collier has shown that immigrants are not only escaping wars and poverty, but failed social models. What is to say that Sweden is robust enough to assimilate all those coming in with all these failed social models? There have been a number of high-profile recent scandals of how the welfare state has been milked that give one pause for thought. Swedes look at their country and say, we are robust and powerful and can afford to be good. But Sweden is actually a small country of 10 million, and the ecology of its success is fragile. It must be preserved. Nima Alipour is a local councillor for the Sweden Democrats. He's also an active blogger and trainee history teacher. A Muslim convert to Christianity, he's lived in Sweden since the age of 5. He loves his country, Sweden that is, and worries about the economy and social cohesion if immigration continues at this rate. He's also a passionate anti-racist, but hating racism is not the same thing as wanting open borders. Sweden's best interests are served by controlled immigration, not the unthought-out free-for-all that currently prevails. Persuaded some colleagues on Malmo City Council to listen to him, but they're constrained by what their parties in Stockholm are saying. Isolate the Sweden Democrats. Ignore them.
You see that they're frustrated and they think that some of our opinions are right, but they can't say it. So of course, lots of them are old people who have seen their country change overnight. Because of the immigration, the areas have changed rapidly. So they understand what we're saying.
So does that mean that they actually have to, do they cooperate across the blocks to avoid having to cooperate with you? And what kind of compromise do they get then?
You see, they try to put us out of the committees by making them smaller. Right. That's one of the things they have done in Malmo. So if you have a committee that are 9 members, they make it 7 members, so we don't get in. And when we ask them, why do you do that? No, we have an agreement and that's how we want to do it. There is no real explanation. In the districts we have citizen dialogue groups where politicians and citizens converse, and we're not welcome in those groups. So we are the only party that are not welcome in the citizen dialogue groups. There are politicians from all parties, and when we ask them what's the reason for that, we're the 3rd biggest party in Malmo. We have citizens who want to talk with us, and they say, no, you're not a democratic party, and what does that mean? And we don't get any explanation.
Do you have contacts with parties and other, like UKIP for instance in the UK? I mean, do you think that the Sweden treats its national party more badly than happens in Denmark, or the UK, and Belgium, for instance?
Yes, I think Sweden is the country that the treatment we're getting is the worst. I think in the entire Europe. We got like people from our party. Their character is getting like a lot of. They're like being attacked in the biggest media.
Yeah.
And you just have to be very careful when you're a Sweden Democrat. You can't do any mistakes. So people in our party who are normal people and do mistakes sometimes, they can't show their face anywhere, and if they have a company, their company goes bankrupt because the media writes about them so much negative stuff that they don't have any customers anymore. So, and the thing is, other people from other parties also do mistakes, but when we do mistakes, it becomes a national event.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about it, right? And all papers are writing about that every day. The discrimination we're facing is that when somebody finds out that you're a Sweden Democrat, you get a lot of strange questions about your political values, and that's very uncomfortable to get those questions, because usually in Sweden you can be in a political party and not answer any questions about those political values. So that's something that is very uncomfortable. But when it gets more extreme, it's when somebody wants to do something good for the society, and he chooses to attack Sweden Democrats because he wants to do something good. And he has heard from the media that we are bad people. So I have been in my university. There has been people calling me Nazi and that kind of stuff. And I don't get that mad about it, because I know they want to do something good about the society. So I tell them, you can give money to Greenpeace if you want to do something good. You don't have to insult me. The sad thing is that the situation in the suburbs are getting worse, and nobody is doing anything about it. And we had a warning in Husby, where we had riots in Husby, and everybody said that we were going to do something about the situation in the suburbs, but nothing has happened. We discussed in Sweden, and I think when that happens, things turn a little ugly.
It's interesting that the Social Democrats had to struggle for 30 years. They were abused, they were jailed, in the 1880s, and Sweden was one of the last countries to become democratic in Europe.
And they learned nothing.
Yes, exactly. Now they're the same, But then they became. So I was reading articles in the English press from 1910 saying, "Oh, Sweden, they'll never be changing. It's a very oligarchic country. Nowhere are the Social Democrats so badly treated as in Sweden compared to Norway, And I thought, Christ, you could substitute the word social for Sweden, and they could describe the situation today. But what happened in Sweden within 10 or 15 years was the Social Democrat victory was complete, more complete in Sweden than in. So it came from being the least. Most oligarchic country in Europe to the most working class or most social democratic. So maybe the same will happen.
No, I don't think so. I mean, sure, the Sweden Democrats will gain a lot of votes, but in a postmodern society, it's not likely to have big parties again.
Maybe, yeah.
Because people have a lot of identities, a lot of opinions, and they're flexible voters today. So you have to earn your vote, and it's hard to keep it.
Descriptions of postmodern political identities ringing in my head, it occurred to me that Niemeyer certainly didn't come across as a fascist. Fascism is sometimes defined as the triumph of will and irrationality over debate and reason, but he was a man who could debate any subject under the sun with the best of them. It was his opponents who did not seem able to or willing to talk, who played fast and loose with the rules, like gerrymandering committee sizes, specifically to exclude what was, after all, Sweden's third largest party. Nima also told me he'd been attacked physically and verbally, and during his electioneering he'd been assaulted by, of all people, a school class held out in the open air by a teacher who wanted to show his kids what democracy was. You couldn't make it up. Huey Long once said that anti-fascism is the new fascism. One day I went along to an art show hosted in the Western Harbour area, a kind of Docklands of Malmo. A lot of middle-class professionals were in attendance. I talked to a publisher who said he'd just published a book about how a right-wing extremist assassinated the Swedish Prime Minister. Oh, how they love their right-wing extremists in the Swedish media and publishing worlds. But God forbid should their villain in any of their novels be a Muslim. The teachers and various public officials who have Jewish backgrounds say that they have been harassed by the local Muslim children. The children say that their parents tell them not to meet with Jews and talk to them, and that upsets a couple of teachers here of Jewish background. They also pass on rumours that Arab satellite television tells them about various horrible things that Jews are said to be up to.
Tell them what we heard from a Jewish friend the other day.
Oh yeah. There's a Jewish guy who's quite prominent. We actually met him at the cafe, but Patrick knew him from before. He said, you know, there's no future for the Jews in this country. And I can't get hold of him now, so maybe he's worried about saying that. But we were at the synagogue and I found some reportage on the internet saying horrible harassment, you know. So the Jewish community is now down to 500 after being 2,000. I mean, that's very unpleasant.
And I mean, that's unpleasant, but I mean, it gets more unpleasant when you see how we got politicians in this city who say anti-Semitic statements, and how politicians in this city are not doing anything about it. The only party who is talking about anti-Semitism is the Sweden Democrats. And you know, it's strange because Sweden is a tolerant country, but when it comes to the Jews, Sweden is not so tolerant anymore.
And what happens when you say anti-Semitic to your because this to me is a very powerful weapon, because it's something that everyone can understand, you know, Holocaust and all that. When you talk to your politician colleagues, what are you doing about anti-Semitism? What do they say? Or, I mean,
Well, they think it's sad that we have anti-Semitism, but you see, first is about recognition. Who, you know, we don't got Nazis going around in Malmo streets. That's not where anti-Semitism in Malmo is coming from. It's coming from because we have the Israel-Palestine conflict, and we have a lot of people here who sympathize, with the Palestinians. And during the latest conflict in Gaza, you know, we had a lot of Jews getting threatened, so you could see the connection there.
Yeah.
And the Social Democrats or the Left Party or no party will recognize that this is about a minority in Sweden who is attacking the Jews. And I'm not saying that all Muslims are involved. Most Muslims don't want their children to be racist. So if you fight anti-Semitism, you're helping the Muslims too.
Yeah.
I mean, there are young children who see Arabic media and see these attitudes against the Jews, and they get affected by that. And you have to help those children and say, you know, this is not how the truth is. This is like hate. And nobody recognizes the problem.
When Obama's advisor came to Malmo, probably the highest profile Malmo's had, you know, for many years, what did local politicians, weren't they embarrassed?
No, there was silence.
As the new government goes full speed ahead on immigration, it really ought to explain to its citizenry answers to the following questions. Will Sweden halt the growth of anti-Semitism? Will the new Sweden be a country where Jews feel comfortable? Will the Swedes be able to combine a welfare state with continued mass immigration? Will Sweden manage to reverse the decline in school standards with mass immigration? Can Sweden combine democracy and political correctness with respect for those who don't want to see the Sweden of open borders and mass immigration? They must have a voice too.